So
That's it. It is. It's a big grab bag. Well, man, I'd like to begin our story before we get into your life as a Good Samaritan and the good work that you're doing in the world by asking 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out this pandemic. How long is it going to last? When are we going to get out of it? All these things. How did you survive that pandemic era? And how did it ultimately change the way that you do things now?
our situation is a little different because we contract with the Department of Correction for what we call rehabilitative housing. So we have men coming out of prison coming to our homes, and they may or may not have been exposed to COVID. So we had to expect the worst case scenario with 20 different houses, 100 different men, and if one person is infected, it could travel through every house, and it could have been a nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
Needless to say, we were extremely nervous, but we survived with very few cases of COVID, and the cases we did have were fairly minor, and it, it was an unknown territory because we just didn't know how bad this was going to be. And I would say we dodged a bullet, and not just locally, but as a people, it could have been a lot worse for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get to the heart and soul of the good work that you do. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Well, my son's a police sergeant, and he says he I lock him up, Dad, and you bring him home. So, what happened was, I guess it was about 25 years ago. I read a report, a study showing that that the majority of money is spent in the prisons, and it's not being cost effective. It's not working, quite frankly. The lock them up issue was not working because people were actually learning new skills in prison to make them worse when they get released.
Yeah.
So what they decided to do was work on community policing. How do we get people back into the community so they can be rehabilitated? So we work with what's called moderate to low risk offenders who simply need a safe place to restart their lives. And the idea is that if you can get a job and you can pay taxes and pay for housing, and if you can pay your child support, then the community benefits. But if you're in jail, it costs $86 a day for taxpayers, and it doesn't help anybody. So once somebody serves their time, then the idea is, how do we help you now become part of the community? And our recidivism or return to prison rate has gone from upwards of 45-50% down to about 30%. So it's effective all around.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What was your dream when you were in the third grade? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, in third grade,
Yeah.
I think I wanted to be Zorro at the time. Then I realized I couldn't ride a horse. No, yeah, I'll be quite honest. When I went off to college, I was intent that I wanted to be a minister. I thought that would be the ideal profession. But after a few years and going through a lot of questioning and a lot of doubts, I didn't lose my faith, but I lost my faith in my position in the established church. And so I went through a long journey of looking for my place, and because this had been my societal or my family dream, and I walked away from that. And so in the following that, I was a door-to-door salesman, a children's home counselor, a substitute school teacher, a truck driver, a fireman, a building contractor, and then a journalist. And I even at that point, one time, I even tried to go back into the church, and I found that to be quite candid, I just didn't do that well. And so here I was at 50 years old, gone through about 8 careers, and I didn't know where I fit or what I was going to do with what seemed to be the rest of my life. So that's why I believe in second and third and fourth chances, because that was when I started Good Samaritan Home. I was 53 years old.
Wow. So take me back to where you were born and raised. What were these seeds? Because what you're doing is so impactful. It requires you to give a lot of yourself. Take me back to your beginnings and what led you to evolve this way. And obviously there was different incarnations leading up to this, but what were the ultimate seeds that were planted in you early on that grew into who you are?
Looking back, we grew up in what I would consider a fairly typical home, where your father goes to work in the factory, in the mill it was in Pittsburgh, and your mother stays home and cooks. But we grew up and we just went our separate directions. So I call it, we were strangers in the same house together. And what I've realized is that there are so many people who grow up without, we consider to be the nurturing or structured family. And in worst case scenario, they end up in jail or in prison because they have no training. So that idea of a dysfunctional family, uh, not that we had abusive situation, we had what I consider to be an absent situation. But what I've found with most of the people we deal with, we've met and helped 2,500 men and women in our program, and almost every one of them said they came from a family without a father or a mother, and definitely without structure. And you factor in drugs and alcohol, so they grew up without a family. So we're not trying to rehabilitate in many cases. We're trying to habilitate. We're trying to give basic things like this is how you make your bed, or this is how uh, you're responsible to a roommate, or you show respect by simply uh, closing the door at night, because that's what normal people do. They show respect to one another. So it sometimes I feel like I'm in junior high school, because we're dealing with people who may have grown up, but they've never developed the skills needed.
Yeah. So, are you happy with this choice? How long did it take for you to kind of settle in and find that this was your path in life?
What happened was I was 53, as I said, and I had no job and no place to live. I was uh, so what I said was that let's do something we've always talked about. Let's try, because I had people, homeless people, come to my door, and we couldn't help them. So what we decided to do was we bought the oldest house in town and started rehabilitating it. So I started rehabbing it or renovating it. And we also opened up one of the bedrooms to allow homeless people to come literally live with us. And we were able over the next year to find a house across the street that we used as a shelter. So we started by having a homeless shelter and offering temporary housing to local homeless people. But then the Department of Correction asked us if we could also work with people who are on supervision, on parole. And so that's where our relationship with the Department of Correction came in. And since then, we've contracted to take, right now, we have give or take 100 men and women in our houses in the Dayton area. And they stay for free, but they're in a what we call a monitored or mentoring relationship. It's not lockdown, but it's where we try to give them a safe place so that they can get a job and save enough money to get back on their feet so they can get their own house. And because the statistics show that if you can have just a safe place to get a job, then you can make it. But without a job or without housing, you can't get a job. And if you can't get a job, you're going to be homeless. So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. So, who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration in your life?
I hadn't thought of that question before. Uh, it sounds cliched, but I remember reading Dr. King a great deal in the 60s and 70s. And I was just telling my wife recently, with all the political hostility we feel right now, that I genuinely miss Dr. King's voice of reconciliation, that idea of you have a moral principle guiding your life. And and that's what I don't see anymore. I don't see that sense of commitment to a greater cause. And that's why our organization is definitely faith-based, but it's not a religious organization. It's our faith motivates us to do this work, but we don't require that from others. We simply, the question we ask is, are you hungry?
Yeah.
How can we help you?
So let's go to your journalistic kind of mindset in that career. If you could meet one person alive right now on the planet, spend some time with them, interview them, who would that be?
Ooh, wow. Wish I had been prepared for this one. uh, the again, it might sound cliche, but our situation today, the intense hostility we feel in the communities, it reminds me a great deal of the 1850s. And when I read what Abraham Lincoln, how he responded to that hostility, and he was constantly focused in on how to bring people together rather than to subjugate people. I suppose if I could meet somebody in history, it would be Abraham Lincoln. And I apologize, that sounds cliche, but I don't mean it that way. It's
No, no, I think that's an excellent choice, and you're totally right. In this politically divisive world that we live in right now, it would be good to have someone that was calm. And I always bring this example up. No matter what your politics are, I remember when I was a kid and the Challenger exploded in '86. And at that point I was in junior high and I was going to watch Christy McAuliffe go to space. She was going to teach us. It was a big deal for us. And I remember that night, Reagan talked about these astronauts were going up to kiss the
yeah,
face of God. And I remember that speech and how much calm and how there was a leader, no matter what side you fell on the line, that could calm us and be that voice instead of having this kind of diatribe of things that made no sense to anyone other than the person saying it. And I really miss that.
I was thinking that Ronald Reagan had a way of he and Tip O'Neill could disagree, but they could sit together and talk,
Yeah,
and they could come to some sort of reasoned conclusion. And we're just not seeing that anymore. And it's I guess it's tiring, it's exhausting. And what I do then, Joe, is I just focus in on our work. I may not be able to change the world, but maybe I can help this one guy get a job, keep a job, and maybe his life will be a little better.
absolutely.
So that's I can change that corner of the world.
Yes, you certainly can. So at the end of the day, when you wake up every day, what is your motivator to do this work? Your work obviously takes a lot to help people, but you also have to evolve as a human being. What is that collective gumption for you every day to wake up to do this work?
I remember when we first started, we opened our first house here at the town, it's a little town, 13,000 people outside of Dayton. And we had a lot of blowback. There were petitions, there were council meetings, there was lawsuits. We had to fight very hard to keep the house open, and eventually we won our cases. But the idea that we're not doing this for profit, we're not doing it for any self gratification, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And that's what I keep asking my staff is, what's the right thing to do here? And again, I think that comes back to this idea of uh, uh, the moral guidance that Dr. King had, where he believed that we're accountable not just to the law of the land, we're accountable to the creator of the law of the land. And he was able to say, I may not be able to see the conclusion, but we as a people will eventually get there because the arc of the moral universe does bend toward justice. And maybe that's what it is. We went through probably about 7 or 8 years of conflict, and now the same people that were critical of us now will wave at us with all their fingers, as I call it. So, because by the fact that we've actually been a good neighbor and we've shown them that we are not here to uh, put the neighborhood at risk, we're here to actually improve it. So those same people have become our supporters. So to answer your question, sometimes all you can hang to is what is the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences.
What's one of your favorite client success stories so far? One of everyone you've helped?
I had a call just maybe about a month ago out of the blue. It was from our first resident. His name was Reggie. He had come to us back in I think 2002, and he was literally in our house. So here we were with a stranger who had come from prison, and be aware that this is predominantly a white community, rural, and he was a black man from Cleveland. So he was coming from a different world to him. He was as afraid of the white people as the white people were of him. In fact, he said at times he couldn't walk down the street because he was nervous about the white people. And Reggie not only made it, and he not only got a job and he got married, but now 20 years later, he called and said, I just want you to know how I'm doing, and I'd want to touch base and just say thanks. Reggie is now a long over the road truck driver, and he's been out of prison now for 22 years. And that to me is he's paying taxes and supporting his family instead of being a tax drain.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, of everything that you've done in your career, all these different career choices leading up to now, and everything you've accomplished, what are you the proudest of?
Well, probably when I was 53, I started Good Samaritan Home. When I was 61, I finished my doctorate. But I had, since I was 20 years old, I had always wanted to write a book. And I had nothing to say until I was 65 and I started writing. And at 75, I finally finished what I call my second chance novel. It's fiction, but the idea is like all that we've talked about today is that all of us, not just the guys from prison, but you and I have made mistakes. Some of us are born into families where we don't have the tools. So we have to start what I call running behind everybody else. So when I finished my book just this last December and published it, I felt like this is a story of second chances that people can not only just read, but people can identify with because most of us have never been to prison, but all of us have made mistakes that we wish we could do over. And we feel like we're running behind everybody else. And so that's what I named it, running as fast as I can. This is the best I can do. I just feel like I can't catch up to what I call normal people.
Yeah. Wow. Well said. That's wonderful. So at the end of the day, is the man behind, the Good Samaritan Home and the man behind the book, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, readers, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I have a number two fellow who does what I call my vice principal. He does all the day-to-day work because he's very good at details. But he gets scared to death when I say, let's buy another house, because I know that in 2 years we're going to need that house. So I've gone from one house to 20 houses by saying, where will the need be? And so I think my best characteristic is to be able to dream big and to try, even though I may fail, I try to make a difference by doing something new. But the key is I'm not afraid to ask for help. So I have 10 people working for me who are very good at their jobs. And my concept is to see the big picture and to direct them to share that. And when I hear my staff repeating what I taught them, then I know they got it.
So
So
that's beautiful. So if anyone wants to pick up your book, anyone wants to learn more about what you're doing, help, reach out, any of the good business, how can they do that?
it's called Running as Fast as I Can, and it's listed on Amazon, or you can go johndavidgraham.com. That's my website. And I'm also at Substack. I have a newsletter. It's free. and that's John Graham slash Substack. So,
Excellent.
but I would recommend, just touch base, and people can contact me through my website too.
Excellent. John, you're a pro, man. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. It's vital what you're doing, and it's just sending ripples into the world.
Well, I appreciate you being patient with me, my step into the water here.
No, you're a pro, man. You're a natural.
Yeah.
Keep doing the good work.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Take care.